In 1991, I bought a used Mazda 626 with, I think it was about 70,000 miles. It was a 1986 model. And gosh, we ended up driving that thing until I think 2004 or 2005 when we donated it to a church who then gave it to an older woman on a fixed income. And she, until we left there, we still saw her driving that thing around. So needless to say, since that time, I have been a huge fan of Mazda. I have owned at least one Mazda like all the time continuously from now until then. Sadly, in 2018, when I purchased my Mazda CX-5 from a dealership new, I realized it was the last new internal combustion engine car I was going to purchase in my life. So that meant that definitely, considering that Mazda has pretty much gone all in on internal combustion engines, that was probably the last Mazda I was going to buy new, at least, from anybody. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I really do know it all or not. Definitely make sure you hit the thumbs up button if you enjoy this. So anyway, why the title of this? Why am I definitely probably going to buy a Tesla Cybertruck when it comes out? Well, first of all, I am actually in line for the Cybertruck. At an estimation, and we're somewhere around number 600,000 in the list. And that was intentional. That was not a mistake. Like, I wasn't like, oops, I forgot to sign up earlier. We very much intended to be late to the game so that we would hopefully get the truck somewhere in the 2024 to 2025 range. As I said in the intro, I purchased a Mazda CX-5 in 2018 new, and certainly you want to own that car for 5, 6, 7 years to get, a good amount of use out of it. So 2025 is just about exactly the right place. I figure, we will see. The other thing about it is we only had to put $100 down, and it's refundable. So it's really not that big a deal if we change our mind later on. So I think one thing that's really important to talk about is I am not a traditional truck owner. The only truck body car that I have ever purchased in my life is a Toyota 4Runner it was a 2003, purchased it in 2002, but it was a 2003 model. Just sold that car in July or August of 2019, so last year. And that that thing, it taught two teenagers to drive. It pulled boats. It did yeoman service, and it was beat to crap by the time we sold it, and it was still sucked up. I think I put it on sale on Facebook Marketplace, and within like 2 or 3 hours, I had over 100 emails or messages to me concerning the truck. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's a very popular thing. So clearly, we live in the United States. Even though I'm not a truck owner, there are many, many, many truck owners. My wife has owned trucks and SUVs her entire life. In fact, it was kind of funny. What she really, really wanted to buy was a Mini Cooper. So we actually bought a used Mini Cooper, and that's our other car. So we currently have a Mazda CX-5 and a Mini Cooper. But she wanted something very different than a truck. And ever since she's bought that, she's been complaining about the fact that we don't have a truck because we're not able to haul things and so forth. So anyway, even though I'm not a truck person and I was never a truck owner, I find the Cybertruck quite interesting, and I just found it too intriguing not to at least put down $100 and say, let's give it a shot and see what happens. So what are the pros in terms of my thinking about this? First of all, of course, only $100 deposit, so, and it's refundable. So again, not out any cash necessarily. So that's one thing. But moving on to real advantages or pros to this. First of all, the base model is approximately the same price as the Model Y, but you get so much more car for that. I mean, literally, you get so much more car for that. It is huge compared to a Model Y. I'll try to put up a graphic that's kind of comparing like a normal size sedan or SUV to the size of the Cybertruck. It's kind of mind blowing. I'll actually get back to that. That is also a con to this whole thing too. Second of all, and this is really big for me, I'm a very kind of like, I don't know, OCD kind of person, but the Cybertruck will not have paint, which means that you won't have paint scratches. Paint scratches bug the hell out of me. As soon as I buy a new car, it seems like within a month there's some scratch that happens in a parking lot or something, and you just tear your hair out, and it's just awful. There's a real advantage to having just a stainless steel body. if it gets a little scratched, it just adds some character to it, right? It's sort of like having a stainless steel watch, and if you have a little scratch on it, it just adds some character to it. As opposed to paint, where you're just like, oh gosh, there's this line and the paint's gone and it looks ugly and so forth. I have a feeling that the stainless steel is going to be a big advantage for that. So definitely no paint is a good thing for me. Of course, the Cybertruck should be cheaper to run over time. There's been several videos and articles talking about total cost of ownership versus something like a Ford F-150 extended cab, which puts it in the same range. The initial purchase price is $5,000-ish more. Now, with the exception of if you buy Autopilot, and of course I'm talking about the base model, I'm only getting the rear-wheel drive base model, $39,900 or whatever, $40,000 US essentially. The Autopilot changes things a bit because that adds $7,000 to the cost currently, so it's like, Anyway, but without the Autopilot, kind of comparing apples to apples, it looks like the extended cab Ford F-150, which is the most popular truck in the US, would run you right around $35,000. So initially the Cybertruck will cost about $5,000 more, but it costs a lot less to fill it up. It costs a lot less to run. It doesn't have maintenance issues long term like a Ford F-150 would. So there's a huge amount of reduction. And in addition, Teslas tend to sell for more on the resale market, like a used market, than Fords do. So you're going to get more money back at the end. And I'll talk about this in a bit. The Cybertruck should still be in really good shape after 5 to 10 years or something like that. So you should be able to recoup a chunk of that money on the far end by selling the truck and getting something else. Of course, it goes without saying that the Cybertruck will be better for the environment than a diesel or gas-powered big truck. You don't have the cost of getting that stuff out of the ground. You don't have the greenhouse gas emissions, especially if you use green energy to power your truck. I already have purchased a couple of blocks of solar power from Georgia Power. They have the ability for you to purchase blocks of green power. I probably will up that when I get an electric truck in order to produce more power, help to produce more power green. We're just not in a situation where we can spend $10,000 to put in a solar roof at the moment, but I think that, even without doing that, it's helpful to be able to at least support that from the power company that is running and to help them transition to being green. Assuming that what is everybody's guess at this point, which is that Tesla has basically got a 1,000,000-mile battery working, that really changes the equation of cost of ownership. So if you have a 1,000,000-mile battery, you're not going to drive this thing 1,000,000 miles. So let's say over 10 years, we put 300,000 miles on that. That's 30,000 miles a year. That's a lot. That still leaves 700,000 miles of equivalent time. So we could use then the auto bidder software that Tesla has already got out and already exists to purchase electricity at a profitable time, at a low cost time, and then sell it back to the grid at a high cost time. That will take a lot of charging cycles out of the truck, but that's okay because we have a lot of spare charging cycles. So assuming the 1,000,000-mile battery, being able to use auto bidder software will allow us to reduce the cost of the truck by a good deal by just buying and selling electricity. Also, assuming the 1,000,000-mile battery, the fact that you could loan your car out as a robo-taxi of sorts, right? So that it's just autonomously driving around, picking people up, dropping them off, etc., and being utilized while you're not using the truck is another way to generate quite a bit of money. It appears that Tesla is going to set up a whole scenario where you can basically just do this without having to lift a finger. Basically, you just tell them it's okay. They'll have software that does it. They'll take their cut. You get your cut of whatever the amount of money it is for this. And that will, again, help to pay for the truck over time. So one way to think about this is that cars/trucks are expenses. Unless your business depends on driving a truck and having a truck, if you're a consumer, this is just an expense. There's no asset involved in this, I guess, unless of course you're loaning it out as a robo-taxi or something, in which case it does become actually somewhat of an asset. But generally speaking, this is an expense. So you want to reduce the expense as much as possible. Now, spending $47,000 on a truck up front does not seem like that, but if you start taking account of buying and selling electricity and being able to use it to autonomously drive people around and pay for itself. And by the by, the Cybertruck is a better option for robo-taxi type of situations than is something like a Model Y or a Model 3, because those are aluminum. Those are kind of fragile if you think about it. A Cybertruck is a bit of an indestructible beast, and so I wouldn't be nearly as concerned about strangers driving around in my truck as I would be with a Model Y or a Model 3 or something like that. I do think that what Tesla should do is they should give you a sort of a package if you want to do this, and maybe pay a couple $100s to have it installed. But a couple of small security cameras internal to the car would be really, really a good idea. I would feel much better if there was like some sort of screen recording going on, so that if somebody did mess up your car or your truck, that you would have recourse to actually saying like, hey, you did that. I saw you like throw up on the back of the car or spill a Coke or something. That would be useful. So that's just a little bit of advice for Tesla, as you're starting to think about this, that you should maybe sell a small kit for either an upfront cost or just taking something out of the cost of the rentals, to allow us to be able to see what's going on and record that for future reference if we need to. So it appears that Cybertruck has a relatively low total cost of ownership relative to the very expensive purchase price of the truck. So all of these things are pros. What are the cons? What's kind of holding me back from thinking about purchasing this truck in the next few years? Certainly the number one thing in my mind is the expensive initial purchase price. I have never spent more than, I think $29,500 was about the purchase price of the Mazda CX-5 with all the bells and whistles attached to it. So we're talking about $17,000 extra dollars to purchase this thing. And that's, it gives my heart palpitations to start thinking about spending that much money on what is essentially an expense. Also, I find it really annoying that Tesla charges as much as they do, and supposedly will be charging more and more for Autopilot. Number one, it doesn't really work yet, so that's really annoying to pay that much money for it. But number two, it seems like that should be more along the lines of a couple $1,000s at the most, or even included with the car. I don't know. That's just my own personal opinion. Obviously, people pay for it. Obviously, I'm signed up to pay for it when it comes out. So there is a benefit, but it is an annoying thing that it adds $7,000 to the cost of a car that's not that expensive to start with. The next con, in my mind at least, is the looks of the truck. I'm glad that I'm not going to be the first person to own it on the block. I will be able to look at them in the wild and for real before I have to purchase it, but it looks too much like a Pontiac Aztek in my mind. And I'm really afraid that in 10 years, people may go like, ooh, it's the Cybertruck. It's the Pontiac Aztek of the 2020s. All of that is definitely a concern for me. And aesthetics does drive some of my intent to purchase a vehicle. I want it to look nice. But I'm open to the idea that my mind is going to change about that. I'm also really worried about how big the truck is. That's another big con for me. If you can't fit it in a garage, I'm kind of like a big garage kind of guy. I like to keep the car safe and tidy in the house or in the garage. So I've kind of been thinking about that. It's like, okay, am I willing to put up with the fact that this truck is going to have to sit outside all the time? It's going to bake in the Georgia sun in the summertime. It doesn't get that cold here, so it shouldn't be that bad in the winter. But the summer is pretty brutal on automotive vehicles because the sun just bakes down all the time and they get very, very hot. And the last con that I can really think of is the range. So 250 miles for the base range is just on the bottom end in my mind. I'm hoping that by the time 2024 or 2025 arrives, that with the battery technology and software updates and so forth, they'll be much closer to 300 miles for the base range. I'm, kind of crossing my fingers, but that's a definite con in my mind. I would much rather have 300 to 400 miles range, of course. I'd also rather pay 10 cents for the truck. So, we can't have everything we wish for, but that's a definite con in my mind. And finally, what are the things that I'm kind of on the fence about and I'm waiting to see what will happen before purchasing the truck? First of all, I got in line relatively late on purpose, somewhere around number 600,000. I assume that about a third of the people will drop out, which will put us somewhere around 400,000. But, at an estimation, that should put it at very late 2023 at the absolute earliest that it would be available. I'm actually hoping it's going to be more like late 2024 before it's available. That would be kind of ideal timing for me. So that was, I sort of was playing the odds and let's see what happens. Let's see if we can push it out by about 4 years to see what will happen with that. So first of all, hopefully any production kinks that happen with the early versions will get worked out. So that's definitely something to wait and see. By 2024, if things aren't rolling at a really good pace and they're not rolling them off the line and they're not in really good shape, that would be a big red flag for me. Second of all, as I said, it would be nice if they could get a lot closer to 300 miles with the base model Cybertruck. So I'm waiting to see about that, and we'll see what happens. If it gets up to 300 miles by 2024, then the con that I had goes away. So that takes away one of the cons that I had on my list. I'm of course also waiting to see if the million-mile battery will come into existence. Tesla Battery Day is supposed to be soon. It was supposed to be in April, so we'll see what happens. But, that should be resolved relatively quickly. And if they don't have something like that on the cards, and if they're not planning to use that, that then goes into the con category. But hopefully, they'll work that out and it will be part of the package, in which case that ups the level of my likelihood of purchasing the truck. The next thing, of course, is autopilot capabilities. Assuming that legislation comes through and assuming that their technology is working well, I would imagine in 3 to 4 years, autopilot should be pretty flawless. It better be pretty flawless. Again, for the price, it's expensive. But, if that is not there and it looks like it's pretty bad, number one, I will definitely drop the autopilot option because it wouldn't be worth $7,000 at that point. But number two, it also reduces the value of the Cybertruck as a whole, like any Tesla automobile. There's a real advantage to having something that has the capability of being a robo-taxi. It has the capability of you saying, I want to go to the store, or I want to go visit my parents who live pretty far away. And it just takes care of it, and you can work on your laptop or read or sleep or whatever the heck you want to do. I hate driving. I really, really hate driving. So I'm really, really hoping that this stuff is going to be there by the time I can purchase this truck. Honestly, that would be like a fantasy to be able to just get in the car, tell it where you want to go and go to sleep for an hour or something, right? That would be lovely. And the final thing is this car just going to be too ugly? So that's something where I just have to see one of these in real life. That's just all it is going to take. That's why it's in the still to see what happens category, right? If it's so ugly when I look at it in person that I just can't stand the thought of me being inside one, then I will bail on the purchase. I expect it's probably going to look better in person, and I will probably think, well, yeah, I actually kind of like that. And, after 3 or 4 years, after seeing them on the roads, after the Tesla Model 2 comes out or something like that, which is a small car, which will be like made out of the same shape as the Cybertruck, it could happen, right? But after those kinds of things, the aesthetic or the cultural expectations of what a car should look like will probably be changing by then. And so I'll probably be much more willing to purchase a Cybertruck in 2024 than I am right now. So anyway, those are my thoughts, the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, no pun intended, and what I'm waiting to see in the future before making a complete decision about whether to purchase the Cybertruck or not. But like I said, I'm in line. I'm hoping for the best. I actually really, really, really want to love this truck because I really, really want to own a Tesla. And this just seems like such a good deal that it's basically the same price as a Model Y. I can't see, except for the looks and some other things, any reason to purchase the Model Y over this truck. It just seems like a better idea, at least in the United States. I know in other countries it's just so freaking big that it's not going to fit on roads. So in the US, where we have huge roads all the time, I don't see a reason to purchase a Model Y over the Cybertruck, unless you need it right now, of course. If you enjoyed this video, definitely make sure you hit the thumbs up button, and please ask questions in the comments or at my email address, which is DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com. And also, please help us out if you enjoy this stuff by going and clicking on our Patreon link in the description. You can look at that. You can look at the material that's there. You can also look through all of our previous videos, and you can see if you like some other things. I'll try to highlight a couple of them here at the ending so that you can look at a couple of Tesla/SpaceX topics, and I'll see you next time. Till then, bye-bye.